Beth DuBois and Galyn Murphy-Stanley collectively manage the Interfaith Community Co-op at 324 University. And this is one of the largest emergency food distribution efforts in the city of Syracuse. They provide 2, sometimes 3 emergency food distributions a week to roughly 1,200 Syracusans. We are proud to have Beth as an advisory board member, and lucky that means that we are also able to tap into Galyn's knowledge and expertise as well. Thank you both for joining us today, share about your work, and start a discussion on the recent end to the SNAP expansion.
Hey folks, we are gonna go ahead and share screen as well, because you can't have too many PowerPoints, right? So I wouldn't want y'all to feel deprived. So can everybody see that? That's my first question. Thumbs up? Good enough? So just some very, very quick things. And I can send this link to Avalon and to Maura if you all want copies. But if you haven't, this is a great quick overview of where we are as a county and how many folks are living in poverty. But in New York State, food insecure households make up 10% of the population, which is a horrible, in my mind, statistic. And especially when we look at Onondaga County in general, we're in the 13%. If we go very, very quickly and do some simple math, we notice a couple of things, and I just want to draw your attention down here to employment and poverty. This is based on ALICE. If you're not familiar with ALICE, that's the United Way process of trying to figure out real costs of living. So it takes into account both changes in inflation, unlike the federal poverty rate. It takes into account costs for real things like transportation and internet access and all those lovely things that often don't get taken into account. The federal poverty rate is woefully outdated, even with the supplemental pieces that they've added in. So for one adult and one child here in Onondaga County, they got to make about $30. If we look at just getting a 2-bedroom apartment, fair market rate, you got to make $17 at a minimum. So the New York State minimum wage is $14.20 an hour, which is horrible, and the feds are still at $7. So just remember that for those of us who are math challenged, I can't do this quickly, right? So I had to write it down and use a calculator. So the hourly minimum wage in Onondaga County is $17 below what the living wage would be according to ALICE, right? Just sit with that for a second. $17 below an hourly wage. When that begins to accumulate, that's why we get generational poverty, right? If you haven't looked at CNY Vitals, right? We sadly keep winning awards, not for having the highest levels of poverty in several different measurements. The one that hit the news several years back was that we had the highest level of concentrated poverty. What does that mean? That means that multiple generations have lived in the same zip code in poverty conditions. Typically, they are African-American in Syracuse. We do have terrible poverty for children, and we again got to be in the top 10 for that as well. These are not awards we want. And you can see on the CNY Vitals, they have a lovely narrative that just kind of gives you a sense of what that means. It's not just that you're not making enough money, but it impacts you in all different kinds of ways if you're struggling with poverty, and especially if it's been a generational pattern. Why do I say all of that? Because knowing that context when we start to think about the emergency food system is really important. So we're going to look at 3 cartoons, because who doesn't love a cartoon? So remember, the food system started with what? The food lines in the 1920s, Hoovervilles, and your favorite source of food, pork bellies. The food system starts delivering emergency food to folks because The national government is either throwing things out like pork bellies or storing things like cheese blocks under Reagan, right? And the cost for storage and the result of throwing away edible food caused a significant stir among the folks who were starving, who would have been happy to eat that. So the first revolution comes with Hoover, right, and FDR after the Great Recession. The second one comes after our good friend Ronald Reagan and the cheese blocks. Think about it. You probably saw them. And now the challenge is that that food banks and the whole emergency food system has evolved to the point where it's institutionalized enough that it unfortunately allows the government in many ways to rely on nonprofit and volunteer support to keep a dysfunctional food system running. And you can tell my bias here. Two of the authors that have written about this, one of whom is Janet Poppendieck, who did a lot of her study in Onondaga County and Syracuse, wrote a book called Sweet Charity. And then the other writer that that Meredith, who's on this call, Meredith's husband, taught me about is Marion Nestle, who also does quite a bit. And that's where you got your cartoon. So I don't want you to avoid an illustrated opportunity. So the food system becomes a funnel, if you will. The national and state grants come through food banks in most major, in most cities, states rather. So it's a state-run organization. All that money and all those grants come through the food bank, which in central New York covers 431 pantries, 11 counties, 17 million pounds of food for 14 million meals, 3.5 million pounds of produce, 2.3 million pounds of dairy, and 94 retail partners who donate. That's that grocery rescue program. The food bank is doing amazing work. And if you ever hear somebody in a food pantry who is critical about the food bank, I just want to let you know it's a shared frustration that both the food bank and the food pantry folk share. This frustration that every day we feel like we're working really, really, really hard and not solving the problem, not stopping the problem. So the funnel comes like this, like that. Love that dyslexia, right? The funnel comes in, and then the bottom rung is us, is the emergency food system. And we get what the food bank can offer in terms of free food. That's USDA food. We get wholesale food, and we get grocery rescue. And those are the three main cycled foods. Yeah, those are our three main sources of food. We take that for the number of people we serve. In our case, we go anywhere from 250 to 275 boxes of food out every Friday, roughly. That's intended for a family of four for anywhere from 3 to 5 days. So that's how you get that 1,200 plus number. And then we do breakfast as well. We try to put together, Galyn does all this work, trying to find the most nutrition dense, low salt, low sugar, protein rich combination of foods we can get in a given day. So why are we talking about SNAP? These are the headlines you see. These are just local headlines. That was all over the New York Times. It's a national conversation. Why is this so important? Well, for most of us in the food pantry system, we have run through our credits at the food bank, which means that any food we get beyond USDA food, free food, we have to buy. So each time a truck comes to University United Methodist Church, for example, it can cost between $6 and $8 grand.
Yep.
They come twice a month. So now we're running through 12 grand a month. We're blowing through our reserves like it's going out of style. And what you need to think about is in Syracuse, at least, that's duplicated at least in 3 other places, plus lots of little pantries.
Yeah.
So while we're on the east side, you've got the food pantry at Assumption, and probably the Northeast Community Center too is the other large one in that quadrant. Then you've got St. Lucy's on the west side, probably supplemented by some of the work that Brady Farm does as much as they can. And then you've got Not much on the south side. The one I know that's open most consistently is the Emmaus Center. All of us rely on the food bank for basic staples and shelf stable stuff. All of us struggle then to be able to continue to provide at least a fairly consistent level of food for folks. So here's what happens. Our quick facts. The emergency assistance that came through during COVID kept 4.2 million people above poverty in 2021, reduced poverty by 10% overall, and child poverty by 14%. We live in the United States, and the amount of folks who are impoverished is insane. Without that emergency assistance, SNAP's going to average about $6.10 per day per person. So pause for a second, because you've just bought a latte and that's it, right? That's all you're going to buy, maybe a muffin. I don't know Starbucks costs these days. In New York, what that translates to is 1,640,000 households have SNAP now. They have experienced an average reduction in a household of $179 per month. An $88 average reduction per person if it's a single household. The total reduction in emergency assistance is $248 million. Think about how much money just went out of the system. So some folks will say, well, we had plenty of notice, you know, folks should have been able to adjust their budget. That'd be great if they had any alternative stream of income for their budget to begin with. They don't. So now you're talking about trying to adjust your budget when an income stream has gone away, completely gone away, and there's nothing to replace it. What does that mean? Well, so for one of the members of our food pantry, for her, she's disabled, she's in her mid-50s. What that means is she has to pick and choose what foods she'll get, or possibly either not getting food so she can spend money on her medicine or her heat. And so she really, really is carefully trying to figure out what she can get from us, and then what she has to go out and buy. Last week was the first time we had eggs.
In months.
In months. But normally our folks are wrestling with, can I afford eggs? And a relatively quick source of protein.
Mhm.
Many of them can't. So if we don't offer it, they don't get any eggs. Think about dairy, especially if you have children. We haven't had free milk in months.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was
I
the
mean,
fall, I think, the
Yeah,
last time.
and then frozen proteins, so
Yeah.
it's the commodity. And then in a time of year, as we are right now, early spring, the huge effort always is produce. We don't have any produce growing locally. It's getting shipped into the area, and so we wholly rely on our recycled food program through the food bank to get enough produce, and there's never enough for everybody.
So some of the things Leanna talked about doing without were things that we all take for granted, most of us that have regular income: ketchup, mustard, mayo, right? Good bread. That's all gone right away, right? And then you have to pick from there. She says there's nothing extra around, and if
Right.
something goes wrong, if there's an unexpected expense, she's toast. I mean, she's just screwed. We need to, when we think about that, what does that express itself in with the folks who come to the food pantry? Well, I think you've probably all seen it in different places, but just so you know, that level of anxiety, or sometimes expressed as depression, will come out in a lot of different ways. Physical aggression, hoarding,
Mhm.
real competition, and almost wrestling with
Yeah.
who can get here first, who can get
Bartering.
whatever. A lot of bartering,
Yep.
a lot of kind of hovering over
Yep.
other folks as they're picking through their food basket, trying to see if I can get something else good, or if somebody will leave that. It takes away folks' pride and
Mhm.
sense of self-worth. They become that sense of dependency on an often unreliable and inconsistent system really begins to just scratch away at your your value as a human being. And for us, that's as problematic as folks not actually being able to get food. Is there anything you
Yeah.
want to add?
No, I want to just lift up that we are approaching summer, and a time of year that is the most needful, most access through the year as children come home. And they, as any of you that have hung out with kids for a while, know that when they're home, they eat all of the day long. The SNAP benefits don't change seasonally. Also, school systems, school programs, school summer food programs ebb and flow with where children are each day, whether there's some beautiful, amazing programs in Central New York, but because of summer holidays and vacations and things of that sort, children aren't able to access them consistently. So we now have children that are now going hungry, and families that are even more aggressive, or who are trying out the emergency food system for the first time, because you have grandparents who are taking care of grandchildren who are from out of state, maybe even, and are in Syracuse for the summer. And so we see an uptick in that. And the children certainly don't come with any additional money or strategies on how to feed themselves. So we have then another whole group of people that are accessing our system for the first time.
And part of the rationale that that made the SNAP cuts acceptable to some members of Congress was that that money was going to be used for a summer program. And so Ellen Vollinger, who works with the Food Research and Action Center, which is the sort of research base for Feeding America, one of the largest food programs in the United States, said, and I quote, she said, "This trade-off for the families who are going to be affected, the math doesn't work out. While there are summer food programs that are supported, the new benefits enacted under the current budget are modest compared to the magnitude of dollars we're talking about that were available with the emergency allotments." So it's almost as if we gave folks $100, but then we cut back, and so now we're going to give them 10, and they should be happy because that's what you'll get in the summer. It's just crazy. So keep that kind of magic math in mind, because that's essentially what happened with the budget thing. I'm just going to click through these, but you can see the overall trend of the graph. I think it speaks for itself. But again, I'll send this to Maura in case you all need graphics for your presentations, or to try to get other resources for folks. We're at the point where there's a lot of conversation about the Farm Bill. That's where SNAP comes from. Take a look at the nutrition here. It's the big green. It's $5.8 billion. All right, that comes for SNAP. Some of the stuff that SNAP does, for every one meal we can provide for somebody, SNAP provides 9 meals. That's a incredible dynamic. You know, these are some of the strengths that happen, but it really, really has proven to be very, very effective in local economies. I'm going to skip the next slide and just go to the other piece, which is the food assistance program. And again, they're looking at cutting that as well, both the infrastructure and distribution. So you all are welcome to this, but I'm going to stop sharing. And right, am I pretty good with time? I think it's time, right? I probably talked too long, sorry.
No, you're great.
All right, folks, Q&A, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Beth and Galyn.
Sure.
Question. Folks can either unmute or use the hand raise function, whatever. Yes.
We left them speechless.
We do that a lot.
I guess I have a quick question. So a couple of folks mentioned some pantries, Beth, that you didn't mention when you were going through where there are pantries. What
I
are
was just going through the big ones.
the big ones? Okay.
That's all I was doing. There's lots of small ones in each quadrant.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah. Some are funded just by their
Yeah.
organizations. So some community organizations run a pantry and they won't use any food bank.
It's all
resources.
donation.
Yeah,
Syracuse University, that's a model that they use up there. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's that's a common enough practice. I think they tend to be smaller pantries, and the COVID went through the emergency food system in Onondaga County, and I'm sure many other counties across the nation like a wrecking ball. So Beth and I are still learning about new conceptions of food pantry or food distribution through the city. We access them through the food bank, through the Find Food platform, or through 211. But there does tend to be a larger pantry or in each quadrant of the city of Syracuse that is open to most all folk in the city, and who can meet the needs of a consumer more globally, not just with food. So that's what Beth was citing.
yeah.
And we are one of those.
So I saw Rhonda's hand and then Kelly. How am I doing?
Hi,
Hi,
how are you, ladies?
Good.
good.
Thank you for that presentation and being so full of the data. That's important. As you know, as much as I do in this field, Syracuse is high on the low totem pole. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Are
sadly.
you very sadly, are you both from Syracuse, New York?
I was born and raised in the Westcott Nation.
Yeah, and I've been here for 25, 26 years.
Okay. I was just wondering, a lot of times, we get folks in this field that are not from this area.
It's
But
not me.
I would love to have a more in-depth conversation with you all.
Sure.
Pertaining to what I've been working on and what I hope to do or will continue to work to do, whenever that might become convenient,
Sure.
for you.
Yeah, Rhonda, I think that our contact information, Moira and Avalon have shared that. So feel free to send me an email, and we could set up an appointment and talk more.
Okay, and I did request a copy of the slides, so I believe Maura and or Evelyn will make those available. Is the
Yeah.
information on the slide?
Mm-hmm.
Should be.
Okay,
If
Thank-
not, I'll add a slide and make sure it is.
okay, thank you very much.
How's that?
Beth, you could also copy the link and just toss it in the chat right now, so folks have it too.
Oh, what
Our-
a
Our
intelligent.
follow-ups
idea.
will take a couple days at least, so
I can do that. I have the technology to do that.
perfect.
So, but Kelly, did you still have a question or did you accidentally raise your hand?
No, I have just a quick question. I'm just wondering how much of the food pantries are set up with some of the local farmers as far as getting access to the excess produce when,
That's a great
you know,
question.
Yeah, it's incredibly personalized and independent, as per the coordinator, and the resources that coordinator can manage at their own site. So we happen to have a phenomenal team of volunteers that work with us every week. So we can manage huge loads of like bulk items and recycled food that we can process quickly and get out to the people in a way that's aesthetically pleasing and curated and things of that sort. I think that Beth, because of Beth's leadership with SOFSA, she has a quick connection to a lot of farmers in the area. And we also have additional personal contacts with a lot of farming groups, CSAs, things of that nature in the area. So we do reach out to them. We're actually in an effort right now to start a food sense effort to bring in local growers and food makers and things like that into that program. But I think that Beth and I are in a luxurious position because we have each other. We are city center, and we also have a phenomenal volunteer workforce. So we can pull on all those resources to make those connections happen.
And speaking of phenomenal resources, we should have a shout out to Ellen, who's worked with us before,
Yep.
and to Meredith is there. And Chris is still on. He came and chatted with us from Syracuse University and is doing an article with the Daily Orange. And we appreciate all of your support
Yeah.
with us. We really, really do. They're terrific folk. We are lucky. Be lucky.
We have
Other
time for one
questions?
last question, if there is one.
Yeah.
Going once. Oh, Avalon, go ahead.
I can ask one. I'm curious about, and I know you all have, dream of the upstream approach, right? Like of being able to address things in our food system so that we don't necessarily need to lean on the emergency food system anymore. But
Right.
if there was like one major takeaway from this, like what is the step forward? Like how do we, what is the change that we should be seeking or advocating for? Or even like not from an upstream approach, like what do we need to be advocating for right now?
My God, I mean, I wish that was a simple answer. I mean, I feel like we know, how to fix this system, right? We know where the need is. We even know what people like to eat and seasonally how to get that to them. But I'm constantly stunned by the expensive food for myself and my own family and how that is so unobtainable for the greater population. I don't understand, even doing this work all day, every day, why we create such an unaccessible path for people to independently acquire their own goods. So I think that is just an overall systems issue in terms of distribution and management of not only food, but product as well. Why, and there's 1,001 reasons that I'm sure I don't have any idea all of, but why procurement of foods seems so difficult for so many populations, and why money has to increase to such a level that it becomes inaccessible, why the quality changes neighborhood to neighborhood, why there's bodegos over, really wonderful food places. And there's so much embedded in all of what I just said that it becomes this snarl of that immobilizes us, I feel like.
I think from my end, I think what broke my heart was when a parent of a disabled young man said to me that receiving the COVID benefits and emergency benefits, the aid, was the first time she and her son had not felt food insecure.
Mhm.
That to me is just pathetic. So I have real, as a pastor, I have ethical problems with that based on my religious tradition, but I also, just as a human being and a citizen in the United States, think there's so much abundance here that we have so much talent that we have the ability to figure it out. And I just want it to happen. And I see Annie raising her hand, and she's going to give us a solution, right?
Come
Set
on,
you up,
Ani.
Ani.
Well, I don't know whether you wanted to switch now, and I also saw before that Mabel was raising her
Oh, sorry, Mabel.
for me. So if there's time for 2 more questions, Mabel was ahead of me.
Sorry.
I just want to say real quickly, I had technical difficulty, so I had to get on the horn and tell them to fix my stuff.
Okay.
Good job. Well done. I think it's over to you now, Ani.
Yeah, Annie, I think if we can do a quick question, and then we can keep the discussion going as well into our breakouts.
So the question is, can we address food insecurity from inside the food system, or do we have to start asking questions related to affordable housing, affordable healthcare?
Yep.
So So
Yes.
to try to find the answers just in terms of farm access and stuff, it doesn't really get into those larger sets of issues.
Yes, thank you for saying that. Yeah, the number one cause of food insecurity is poverty. I mean, it's not embedded within the food system itself. I think there are definite problems with the food system, but the overall reality that our society has chosen not to create policies that address poverty is what affects and is expressed through hunger. That's a reality to me. And it's a policy choice. It's not accidental. It's a choice. Some people deserve food, some people deserve money, some people don't. That's crap. But that's the way our politics works.
There was one question in the chat here.
Sure.
Caitlin, I think it was.
How do you say
Informed of the coming changes that impact so much your budget. So Beth and I have a side hustle. It's writing grants. So we watch our money incredibly closely. This is actually Beth's job, and she tells me, okay, stop.
We have money.
Well, we don't have money. We also do some fundraising stuff. We've started doing that more, and we write grants. It's grant season right now. I've been up to my eyeballs with grants, and we hustle. We talk about our work. We get paid to go speak at lectures and do presentations where we are paid to share the information we have. So money is a huge issue. We talk a lot about it and think a lot about it. People who pray for us pray for it a lot. But we do write a lot of grants, and we've started fundraising campaigns.
And Caitlin, the other thing we do is I hate to say it, but I ask Maura and Avalon a lot of questions in general about to try to figure out what's coming up, issues that are coming up. And we do that with any and all of our contacts, as well as, at least on my end, I read like a fiend.
Yeah.
And try to keep up with whatever I can that's changing in general. So that is hard to do. And I don't know that I do it all the time. So I know I'm way over. Maura's gonna get that crook. Yeah. It's coming.
Well, I do just really want to thank you, Beth and Galyn, for this timely presentation, and also with a lot of gratitude. I don't know if folks know that they were called upon on, I believe it was Tuesday, to pull this together for us. And I do want to acknowledge that our initially scheduled presenters, the Deaf New American Advocacy Group and their new farm, Ashalaya, we were not able to secure their preferred ASL interpreters for this session. And so we are moving them to June so that we can have the best ASL interpreters for them available at that time. But thank you, Beth and Galyn, for putting this together on short notice, for answering the call in so many ways, including from us to make this presentation today. We're really, really grateful for that.
Thanks for the opportunity. And really, if you all have any suggestions, please, we are very open to them. Any resources, really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, come on down and work with us someday.
Yeah.
And Galyn does an incredible job. Hopefully folks see it on the listserv of really sharing volunteer opportunities. And so the folks who are interested, with SOFSA ourselves, we don't always have ongoing volunteer opportunities yet. But if you are looking for hands-on ways to be involved, I think looking to food pantries and lending your bodies to that cause is a helpful step in the direction of supporting this work. So what we're going to do now is we're going to zoom out and go into breakout groups again, thinking about the presentation that Beth and Galyn offered, talking a little bit more about what this presentation sparked for you, and thinking a lot about what else is possible, what is within each of our individual sphere of influence to create change, and also to, what we can do collectively, what you know, none of us is as powerful as we can be when we come together as a network. And so really thinking about ideas both for, you know, to help UUMC, to help this issue more broadly in Syracuse, to help this issue for all people across this country. No one in this country should be going hungry. We don't need to just think about Syracuse. And I think to Ani's point, also thinking out, you know, outside the box with that it's not just about food, it's about a lot of interconnected issues.